Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K. Anil Kumar, Assistant Professor, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Today we are going to talk on module Visual Anthropology from a paper Socio-Cultural Anthropology. After reading this module, the learner will be able to define visual anthropology and classification of visual anthropology. He also able to know about emergence of visual anthropology. He also able to describe aims and objective of visual anthropology. He also derived holistic cultural context of visual anthropology. He also to improve descriptive studying of visual data published by cultures. The explosion of visual media in recent years has generated a wide range of visual and digital technologies which have transformed visual research and analysis. The result is an exciting new interdisciplinary approach of great potential influence in and out of academia. Visual anthropology is newly developed sub-branch of cultural anthropology. It deals with the study of human behavior through visual means, incorporating the theories, technologies as developed in anthropological traditions. Visual anthropology wide by considers various arguments about this subfield but also looks beyond immediate disciplinary concerns to enlarge the possibilities for visual anthropology that's not only concerned with the professional concerns of anthropologists but also adequately presents anthropologically. It analyzes the behavior of people, natives and their different modes of communication. Scientific research needs unbiased and reliable data. Films, sound videotapes, records are today indispensable scientific resources since they can provide reliable data on human behavior that may be later be analyzed by independent investigation in the light of new theories. Experts may also be able to find data that may then give rise to a new theories or may be used to corroborate already establishing theories. The advantage of that film and videotape records over the tools of data collection is that they are independent of language, that is their community callibility in independent of language and in anyone can understand them at least to some extent. Films also help us in preserving the changing way of life in action. Definition of visual anthropology. Visual anthropology can play a very important role in developing awareness of those aspects of culture that condition the formation of the value judgments. The development of such awareness is possible because visual communication can engrave itself directly upon the emotional elements of one's psychic structure. Visual anthropology can also affect the rational level by virtue of its specific language, the language of images. An international journal of visual anthropology defines the field of visual anthropology as the analysis of the structuring of reality as evidenced by visual productions and artifacts, the cross-cultural study of art and artifacts from a social, cultural, historical and aesthetic point of view, the relationship of cultural and visual perception and the study of forms of social organization surrounding the planning, production and use of visual symbolic forms. In addition, visual anthropology has a functions of preservation and communication which it fulfills through the use of films, videotapes and televisions. It is concerned in part with the study of production of ethnographic photography, film and since the mid 1990s new media. More recently it has been used by historians of science and visual culture. Although sometimes wrongly conflated with ethnographic film, visual anthropology encompasses much more including the anthropological study of all visual representations such as dance and other kinds of performance, museums and archiving, all visual arts, and the production and reception of mass media. Histories and analysis of representations from many cultures are part of visual anthropology. The research topic includes sand painting, tattoos, sculptures and reliefs, cave paintings, scrimshaw, jewelry, hagiographics, paintings, and photographs. Also within the province of the subfield are studies of human vision, properties of media, the relationship of visual form and function, and applied collaborative uses of visual representations. Since anthropology is a holistic endeavor, the ways in which visual representation are connected to the rest of culture and society are central topics. Emergence of visual anthropology. Even before the emergence of anthropology as an academic discipline in the 1980s, ethnologists used photography as a tool of research. Anthropologists and non-anthropologists conducted much of this work in the spirit to salvage ethnography or attempts to record for posterity the ways of life of societies assumed to be doomed for extinct. The Ninth International Congress of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences, held at Chicago in 1973, passed a resolution on visual anthropology. The minutes of this resolution, as reported by Hawkins, are film, sound, and videotape records are today an indispensable scientific resource. They provide reliable data on human behavior that independent investigators may analyze in the light of new theories. They may contain information for which neither theory nor analytical schemes yet exist. They convey information independently of language, and they preserve unique features of our changing ways of life for posterity. Today it is a time not merely of change but a spreading uniformity and wholesale cultural loss. To help arrest this process and to correct the myopic view of human potential to which it leads, it is essential that the heritage of mankind be recorded in all its remaining diversity and richness. In an edited volume on visual anthropology, Margaret Mead says in her introductory notes, anthropology as a conglomerate of disciplines has both implicitly and explicitly accepted the responsibility of making and preserving records of the vanishing customs and human beings of this earth. Holistic cultural context of visual anthropology. While art historians are clearly interested in some of the same objects and processes, visual anthropology places these artifacts within a holistic cultural context. Archaeologists in particular use phases of visual development to try to understand the spread of humans and their culture across contiguous landscapes as well as over larger areas. By 10,000 BP, a system of well-developed pictographs was in use by boating people and was likely instrumental in the development of navigation and writing as well as medium of storytelling and artistic representation. Early visual representations often show the female form with clothing appearing on the female body around 28,000 BP, which archaeologists know now corresponds with the invention of weaving in olden Europe. This is an example of the holistic nature of visual anthropology. A figurine depicting a woman wearing diaphanous clothing is not merely an object of art but a window into customs of dress at the time, household organization where they are found, transfer of material where the clay came from and process when did firing clay become common? When did weaving begin? What kind of weaving is depicted, and what other evidence is there for weaving, and what kinds of cultural changes were occurring in other parts of human life at that time? Aims and scope of visual anthropology. Visual anthropology, by focusing on its own efforts to make and understand film, is able to establish many principles and build theories about human visual representation in general. The aims of visual anthropology can be briefly enumerated as follows: to record data for future analysis, to improve our descriptive ethnography, increasing the quality of basic observation, to provide information for related cultural studies and to verify theories, to provide an account for the ethnographer, and to put together a film that will convey to the audience a feel of the people. The promise of visual anthropology is that it can provide an alternative way of perceiving culture perception constructed through distinct ways. That is, definition, scope, and uses of visual anthropology, views of prominent anthropology regarding the discipline. History and development of visual anthropology, the different approaches to anthropological films, history and development of visual anthropology, the different approaches to anthropological films, that is type of film, movie films, feature films, ethnographic films, documentary, visual anthropology, and analysis of cultural style. Visual anthropology is one of the documentation method in anthropology. Visual communication and its advantages, limitations of visual communication over other systems, photography as a medium of communication, still and movie photography. Television and visual anthropology, new techniques of observation and analysis in anthropology, the videotape, advantages and limitations over the systems. Classification of visual anthropology. Brigade 1975 notes the specialized uses of film in research where conclusions are expressed verbally, and unlike the use of film in education where effectiveness is dependent upon context, the use of ethnographic film as public information depends upon the presence in self-contained form of visual attractiveness and intellectual substance. Visual anthropology classifies films into documentary, ethnographic, and educational. Documentary. Marcel Graville is one of the opinions that documentaries are intended for a relatively large and uniform public, and ethnographic films are intended for educational use, particularly in cultural anthropology. The latter must present cultural phenomena and human behavior as accurately as possible and is less conditioned by aesthetic formal concerns. Film has played only a major part in anthropological research. This is in part is due to the fact that film is harder to harness as data than still pictures. But it is also due to temptation or even the pressure to make films in the field of anthropology for reasons other than research. Great documentary films have been made in the field of anthropology by art filmmakers and by expert anthropologists. These films have generally been produced for an audience, for aesthetic experience, and for education. Anthropological films are used as an illustration of culture in teaching anthropology. Ethnographic film. The close association of visual anthropology with ethnographic film that characterized its position for much of the later part of the 20th century is diminishing. One of the major thrust areas of visual anthropology is ethnographic film, which may be defined as a film that reveals cultural patterning. Walter Goldsmith defines an ethnographic film as a film that endeavors to interpret the behavior of the people of one culture to the persons of another culture by using shots of people doing precisely what they have been doing if the camera were not there. The history of anthropological filmmaking is intertwined with that of non-fiction and documentary filmmaking, although ethnofiction may be considered as a genuine subgenre of ethnographic film. The literature about ethnographic film has been hampered by a lack of conceptual structure sufficient to the task of allowing anthropologists to theorize about how film can be used to communicate knowledge. It is a failure that burdens all discourse about non-fiction film. As a result, authors have concentrated on making proscriptions and programmatic admonition and telling vast stories about how a film was made. Other topics of discussion have been the assumed dilemmas between science and art, questions of accuracy, fairness, and objectivity, the appropriateness of the convention of documentary realism, the value of a film in the teaching of anthropology, the relationship between a written and visual anthropology, and collaboration between filmmakers and anthropologists and the native protection of visual text. Theoretical explorations are consequently limited to arguing about whether or not a particular film is objective, accurate, complete, or even ethnographic. With the erosion of the positivist underpinnings of anthropology and documentary film comes the possibility of a new examination of the politics and ideology of film ethnography. Like the documentary, the ethnographic film seems on the verge of some serious theoretical debates, perhaps as a result of criticisms from film theorists such as Bill Nichols and the challenge of indigenously produced media. Visual anthropologists have become increasingly aware of the need for a more secure conceptual basis. Anthropologists always emphasize on the fieldwork through the use of participant observation. While studying other cultures, this participation between the researcher and the subjects being studied should be reciprocal. According to Roth, the way to achieve this reciprocity is through the use of ethnographic film, since it represents the easiest route to establish a dialogue between the anthropologist and his subjects. The dialogue's most decisive moment comes with the presentation of the complete film to the subjects filmed, that is, with what Roach defines as the audiovisual countergift. With the entry of Mead and Betson in 1963 and 1938, the field of visual anthropology, ethnographic film underwent a profound change. There was a shift towards conceptual originality. Anthropological teaching has started taking greater support from films. The museums and universities are not supporting it. With the introduction of culture and personality studied in sociocultural anthropology, Mead and Betson made the most effective use of films for analysis of cultural behavior. Collier is one of the opinion that the works of Mead and Betson depended not only on the viewing of the film footage but also on detailed examination and comparison of enlarged prints of single frames. Visual anthropology makes an explicit distinction between the difference in approach reading the presentation of ethnographic film and the documentary film. How ethnographic films can contribute in understanding a culture or cultures of a region can best be understood by distinguishing between the various uses to which films can be put in the field of social research, education, and visual anthropology. Videotape. The videotape permits coverage of the stream of activity in the natural setting in much of its complexity over relatively extended time periods. Videotape records provide necessary detail on the activity of individual in specific context. Videotape coverage can be advantageous to visual anthropology in many different ways. It supplements the ethnographic accounts of the records of any particular culture. It permits review by scientists and informed participants in the field to stimulate response and increase the scope of interrelation of both general specific socio-cultural phenomena. Lastly, videotape records are employed to establish connections between abstraction and inferences and the observed phenomenon upon which they are based. Feature films. It also involves an appreciation of the value of permanent records and the careful, systematic, and objective study of their visual and sound, that is, verbal, musical, and other content. But there is an equally important difference related to the basic nature of the material. Feature films are fictional and they are frankly viewed as such in anthropological analysis. That is, although fictional films may at times portray aspects of behavior accurately in a factual or documentary sense, this is not the main focus of their study. Rather, these films are taken as projecting images of human social behavior, and these images are the first object of study. Such images, of course, may also be real in important sense, although differing from the reality of detailed records of actual behavior. They may be reflect cultural premises and patterns of thought and feeling. Students, now we discuss how visual anthropology studying visual data produced by cultures. Art, photographs, film, video, fonts, advertisement, computerizations, landscapes, architecture, machines, fashion, makeup, hairstyle, facial expression, tattoos, and so on are part of the complex visual communication system produced by members of societies. The use and understanding of visual images is governed by socially established symbolic codes. Visual images are constructed and may be deconstructed. They may be read as text in a variety of ways. They can be analyzed with techniques developed in diverse fields of literary criticism, art theory and criticism, content analysis, semantics, deconstructionism, or the more mundane tools of ethnography. Visual sociologists can categorize and count them, ask people about them, or study their use and the social settings in which they are produced and consumed. So, the second meaning of visual sociology is a discipline of the study that visual products of society, their production, consumption, and meaning. Applied context of visual anthropology. Applied uses of anthropology outside the academy are becoming increasingly popular in the public sector, industry, and non governmental organizations. In this context, combined with the increasing availability and accessibility of visual media and technologies, visual methodologies and representations are already in use. In some cases, innovations in methodologies of research and representation have developed when visual anthropology that has not been tried in academic visual anthropology practice is used in applied work. This might be due to a range of factors such as different funding opportunities, freedom to innovate without the restrictions of existing anthropological conventions, and different audience expectations. There is a long history of visual anthropologists' involvement with non-academic projects in the creative media as well as social intervention and policy domains, for example, ethnographic television documentary making, indigenous media projects broaching issues of local community development, identity and self-representation, and photographic inventories as a part of wider social research projects. With the recent increase in the use of digital technologies, video, still photography, and hypermedia, there is a much wider access to the use of visual imaginary and audio visual media by anthropologists working both in and outside the academy. Simultaneously, the use of visual anthropological methods of research and representation is now more prevalent in consumer ethnography and design anthropology. Trained visual anthropologists are working with business using visual ethnography and anthropologically informed ideas to provide insights that offer commercial advantage. Anthropologists working in social development overseas use visual research methods and video production as a part of their working practices, and at home anthropologists use visual ethnographic method in applied work in the public sector and policy research. Student, now we summarize the whole module. Anthropology is a word-driven discipline. It has tended to ignore the visual pictorial world, perhaps because of distrust of the ability of images to convey abstract ideas. When engaged in ethnography, the researcher must convert the complex experiences of fieldwork to words in a notebook and then transform those words into other words shifted through analytic method and theories. This logocentric approach to understanding denies much of the multisensory experiences of trying to know another culture. Visual anthropologists sometimes find themselves involved with the research and thinking of professional image makers and scholars from other disciplines: visual anthropology, cultural studies, film theory, photo history, dance and performance studies, and architectural theory, rather than with the work of other cultural anthropologists. The increasing use of visual research methods across the social sciences and humanities, the growth in popularity of the visual as methodology and objective of analysis within mainstream of anthropology and applied anthropology, the growing interest in anthropology of the senses and media anthropology, the development of new visual technologies that allows anthropologists to work in a new ways. The visual anthropology offer a groundbreaking examination of development within the field to define how might advance empirically, methodologically and theoretically, and cement a central place in academic study both within anthropology and cross disciplines. Thank you.